I'm Corinne Schaefer, and welcome to Create Outside the Box. Before we get to our amazing guest, Christina Jones, I wanted to give a little bit of the background story of how her new album, You Are My Compass, was created. When we hear about a love story, it normally ends with, and they lived happily ever after. But what happens after they ride off into the sunset? Kimiko Ishizaka's jazz song cycle, You Are My Compass, explores her own personal love story, one that didn't look like it was going to have a happy ending. After 20 years together, her husband Rob left their marriage, but he was still committed to supporting her and her music. With her world turned upside down, Kimiko explored a path of self-discovery, a path that led her to a new genre, jazz, and to a new role, composer. Music is her way of expressing herself, and after a year, her thoughts, feelings, and personal evolution became the musical love letter, You Were My Compass. As a friend, I was there when Rob was at this crossroads in his life, and I randomly ran into him on a train in Germany where he excitedly shared Kimiko's new compositions. You Are My Compass didn't just serve as a musical love letter. It saved Rob and Kimiko's marriage, and it helped Kimiko expand her creative voice. And it now serves as a vehicle to spotlight an exciting new talent, Christina Jones. Christina Jones is an up-and-coming artist who first burst onto the scene as a contestant in season 16 of American Idol. Since then, she's performed concerts across America, including the historic Apollo Theater in Harlem. Now with her debut album, You Are My Compass, Christina adds her soulful voice to Kimiko Ishizaka's song cycle of love, loss, and freedom. So I'm really excited to be sitting down today with Christina Jones to talk about her new album, You Are My Compass, and to learn more about the process of making the album and more about you as an artist, because I really love this new album. I love your voice. I love the music. So I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk to you too.
So in researching for this interview, I found out that you were on American Idol, season 16. You were 18 at the time, and you made it into the top 50. So you made it over this intense Hollywood week. What was that experience like?
Yeah, so up to that point in my life, that was probably the most stressed that I had ever been. Just because, it's reality TV. And also, it was my first time ever doing something, to that scale. And I was 18, so I really didn't know what I was doing or who I wanted to be or anything like that. So it was it was a very stressful week, but it was the most fun that I had ever had. I met a lot of really, really great people. I met a lot of like-minded artists. I met a lot of different types of artists. I heard a lot of different voices. And I got to meet I got to meet somebody from my childhood that I really, really looked up to growing up, which was Lionel Richie. Yeah. That was that was surreal. That was honestly surreal meeting him in person. He kind of felt like the uncle that I never had.
Yeah.
Even though, I have uncles, I fully have uncles, but You
had a connection with him.
I did, yeah. But I learned a lot. Mostly I learned that at that time, I don't think I was ready to do anything like reality TV. Mm-hmm. A lot of times I felt like I was trying too hard to be myself. I don't even really know how that's possible, but a lot of times I felt like I wasn't bubbly enough, or I wasn't quirky enough, or I didn't have a sad enough backstory or something like that. And I just felt like there was just always something that was off. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know if that was because of the environment. I didn't know if that was how the producers wanted to like narrate all of the interviews, and I just like wasn't fitting the description, or maybe I just like wasn't meant for reality TV. But in that moment I learned that at that time, like I definitely was not ready to be there. But I'm really, really grateful for having had that experience and having learned as much as I learned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was funny as you were talking in the beginning, I thought maybe being 18 had an advantage because you weren't maybe as aware of everything. You could kind of be, I think as we get older, we're more aware of the pressures and we're more aware of the outside factors. So sometimes when you're younger, you kind of go in with this blind fearlessness, but it seems like your old soul at the time was very aware of, okay, there's got to be a story and with the producing. And so you were like a sponge absorbing all of that. So in a sense for you, as you grow as an artist, you're like, I actually feel better now because I feel more grounded in who I am.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm still trying to figure out who I am as an artist. I don't really think that journey ever stops.
Amen.
But I will say, that I do feel a lot more secure in myself as an artist and as a person than when I did back when I was 18. Because when I was 18, I really did not know what I was doing. But it really was kind of like a soaking up moment for me. Mm-hmm. I did learn a lot about how to present myself. I learned a lot about what it means to like have an image and have a certain look. Mm-hmm. I don't think I realized it at the time, but I learned, I guess subconsciously, what it means to brand yourself. Mm-hmm. And it was just interesting because I had never really taken that into consideration. I went into it thinking I'm going to be a singer. And that's what I'm going to be. But I didn't really take into consideration like all the other factors that it takes, or all the other factors to being on reality TV, or even just being in the entertainment industry as a whole.
Yeah. And branding yourself and being aware of that so that you're in charge of the narrative and that you're not having people fit you in a box. Because it's more so in like popular, pop music, rock. I mean, there you really see it strongly, but it's in every form of art. And if you're not self-aware and you don't know yourself as an artist, it's very easy to get yourself as an artist lost in somebody else's branding of you or perception of you. And not only is that going to then be hard to market yourself as an artist and get jobs, but it's going to stunt your growth because at some point you stop listening to what you want and what your path is because you're following what everybody else says based on your branding and based on your look, what it should be. And so, yeah, it's an important lesson to learn. So like, was there anything you learned a lot from that experience at a young age, which is really great because you've taken that with you? Was there anything surprising about that experience where you walked in and you were like, I was expecting cameras, but I wasn't expecting this. This was weird.
Yeah, so I wasn't expecting to do so many takes of reactions to things. Like, it was so weird. They would have people that were selected to go on to the next round. They would have them run in multiple times, like really excited. Because I guess like the first one wasn't like big enough for like the second one like was weird or like that was something that I wasn't really expecting.
No, and it's interesting with when we watch TV or we watch movies or we watch reality TV, anytime you see the camera focus on somebody else, that's another shot. So people are thinking it's this like everything's happening at the same time, but they have different cameras and, so it's reality, but, not really reality. So it's kind of awkward. But so that was at 18. And now you're currently a student at Boston Conservatory at Berkeley, and you're studying musical theater. And it was during one of the online collaborations in the past year and a half that you did with Boston Conservatory at Berkeley that Rob and Kimiko discovered you and first approached you to be the voice for Kimiko's album, You Are My Compass, what was your first reaction to that first reach out?
Well, at first, I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was a scam because because I would get a lot of messages, like weird DMs on like either Instagram or like Facebook or something saying like, "Hey, let's collab." But it would end up being like a spam account or something like that. But I looked up Kimiko and I saw everything that she specialized in, and I honestly thought like, wow, like this is a Wonder Woman. Because I didn't know that she was I think at some point in her life she was a weightlifter. She's like a Bachian, like she's like a Bachian. Is that what it's called, a Bachian?
I have no idea, but she's a specialist in Bach's music. Yeah. I've listened to her renditions of Bach pieces and just like original piano pieces that she's written, and I just thought that her work was beautiful. And so when she approached me, well, she didn't approach me, but when she reached out to me on Facebook, saying like, "Hey, this is my first jazz album and I want you to sing on it." I loved it.
Yeah. I mean, I did. Like, I really, really loved the story. I thought that the songs were pretty catchy. And yeah.
Was it surprising to have basically from Bach to blues? Like you have somebody who's very much classical, and then she's contacting you, and then you're looking her up and you're like, whoa, look at all these places that this woman's performed, and whoa, she's got some classical pedigree. And I'm sorry, what kind of album do you want me to record? Like, so when you were listening, to that music, what were your impressions like after hearing her in such a classical world? And then you're listening, you're like, okay, this is catchy, but were you surprised?
I honestly was, because there were times where I would listen and I'd be like, oh, that's an odd chord, but I kind of like it, like it was just like, it was things that I wouldn't have expected to hear in something like a jazz tune or like a bluesy type tune, but it was just interesting. It kind of caught my ear, if you will. And as soon as I started listening to all of the songs, like the more ideas that I would get for, okay, how can I make this my own? And yeah, it was a pretty interesting journey.
Yeah, I think that her background, I mean, I'm also coming from a classical background, but I love listening to all forms of jazz. That's the music that I turn to when I want to relax. I put on, jazz, or I put on the American Songbook, and, I've got my favorites. But what I really loved is from her classical background, it just added this depth to everything. Like you were saying, like the interesting chords, and especially in the arrangements, like the song What Love Means to Me. I love like when all of that orchestration comes in, like I'm seriously getting Donny Hathaway. What is that song? This Song's for You, or A Song for You by Donny Hathaway.
A Song for You.
Yeah, I just, for some reason, when I listen to that and I hear like the orchestration coming in with your soulful voice. So I'm getting kind of like these references to, I mean, for me on that one, it's Donny Hathaway. Sometimes it sounds like a classic Torch song, where I'm thinking, Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, these soulful, painful, this love story that you're interpreting. But I think the classical background just kind of makes it have a different depth to it and a different feel to it. But that's just my impression.
For me, I think that it's kind of a cross between that and also like Disney almost, or like I'm listening to like something you would see like on a stage, like on like in Broadway or something like that, It
is really theatrical. You're absolutely right.
there's just like an element of swelling like with that song that I really really enjoy.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I love music that is visual, that you immediately get
Yeah.
ideas with, and Kimiko definitely has it for that album. So speaking of the album, they found you through a remote collaboration. And now we've been seeing all of these things online. There's 80 gazillion videos of people remotely collaborating on music. But you remotely collaborated on an album with people that you had never met who are in Germany. So, what was that process like?
It was very difficult, I will say. I'm not gonna lie and sugarcoat it and say, "Oh, it was fine." You know, we had a few ups. No, it was pretty difficult.
Yeah.
Mostly with like recording things and having it cleared, and um, me incorporating my own ideas versus like Kimiko having her own ideas on things, and it was. I think for me the most difficult part was just collaborating online, just because I think a lot of times those inspirational moments would get delayed because of time and because we're not in the same room bouncing ideas off of each other. But at the same time, it was kind of nice because it gave me a moment to have like my own private time with the music, to kind of take it and get out of it the experience that I needed to get in order to make it my own. Does that make any sense? Like,
it makes complete sense, because in this whole, this crazy time period that we've been in, I really miss collaborating with people in person. It's just a different thing. It's clearer. It's faster because it's more direct. You get a sense of people's energy. You can bounce off of each other's energy and ideas. You cannot do that remotely. And I miss that. At the same time, though, I agree with you. Like, having kind of this insulated artistic period, I find that I can hear my inner voice more. I'm getting more ideas. I feel more creative. So like, as we're venturing out, I'm like, okay, how do I keep this, but add it to what I was missing? Because sometimes there's too many cooks in the kitchen, and there's too many voices. So it's like, okay, how do I keep this stillness and listen to my voice and let other people's voices and opinions, come in and collaborate, but without losing what I'm bringing to it? That's a challenge.
Right. I will definitely say that was also another challenge that I faced. But at the same time, like, I still wanted to do right by the story. Because for me, at the end of the day, telling the story was the most important part, because that's the whole reason why the album was made. So I wanted to keep that as the focal point in adding my own, I guess, my own zhuzh to it.
Yeah. And that was one of the questions I wanted to ask, because, we are storytellers. That's our job. And how hard is it when you are the voice of a living person? You're conveying something that happened to this person that they set to words and music. So how hard is it balancing their story, but at the same time, you have to make it your own, because you have to find an authentic, vulnerable place within you to connect with what they were going through, because you didn't experience exactly what they were experiencing.
Right. And I think especially because of the age gap, I don't have as much experience, especially with loving another person, as they do. And so it was kind of hard for me at first to figure out where my voice fit in. But I think that the songs are written in such a way that it's easy to feel the heartbreak and feel the sorrow in your own way. And I think with something like this, that's what I love the most about just being an artist in general, and collaborating on something like this in general, is that yes, the story was written specifically, but once it's out there for people to experience in their own way.
Hmm.
Um, I think that it's absolutely beautiful the way that I think that it's absolutely beautiful the way that you can find your own voice without having the exact same experience
Hmm.
as the other person. Um, yeah.
No, and that's actually the point. This music was composed at a very painful time. This music then ultimately brought their love back to life.
Right.
And then you're having your experience creating it because it's such visual music and it's so theatrical. You can connect with it in the ways that you can. And then people listening to it can easily then piece it into their experiences and their life, which are going to be very different than what they were going through. But music's very healing. I mean, how many times when you're in a bad mood or whatever, or you're sad about something, you put on some music and like, who's to say you're feeling exactly what that singer felt, but you feel like you're feeling it with whoever's performing, and it's cathartic
Yeah.
and it's healing.
Yeah.
And I think
Absolutely.
that's what's so great about making music and storytelling is that you and through the empathy we all feel together and we're able to experience the emotions together.
Yeah. Like I will never know what it's like to be with some. Well, that's not true. But as of now, I don't know what it's like to be with somebody for 20 years just to have them up and leave because they want out. Like I don't know what that's like. I don't know how much pain I would be in. And also I'm not Kimiko. I don't know how me as myself would react.
Mm-hmm.
Um and so I think that the way that she wrote these songs, while it is very very specific I mean obviously it is specific because it's again it's her story, but I love the way that they're written because I can still get that immense pain.
I had brought this up before, but I didn't get to ask you about it. Is I do feel that there are, hints of, again, these torch songs. You think of the great artists like Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan. Were you thinking of some of these artists as you were creating the album, or did it harken back to that era for you, or were you just solely in your own space?
I think for me I was just kind of in my own space. um I think that for some songs I might have channeled my inner Ella. Like I think especially for something like Just a Moment Ago, like
Mm-hmm.
I definitely like channeled my inner Ella and everything like that. But I think for most of the songs, because like you said, they're so visual, I kind of just imagine my voice existing with the music.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it felt it did feel very very theatrical for me, and so a lot of times whenever I would record the music, I was focused more on the emotion and the storytelling aspect and the way that my voice worked and moved with the music
Mm-hmm.
rather than like channeling all of the people that I look up to. I mean, I feel like I did, but I don't think that was what I was like really focused on.
No, it was almost like through osmosis, because it's just,
Yeah. It
yeah.
was kind of more subconscious than it was like something that I kept at the forefront of my mind.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of all of these great artists, you got to perform at the Apollo Theater, where a lot
Hmm.
of amazing artists have performed. When was that? What was that like? Did it feel like you were standing in history?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. As soon as I touched that tree stump, I felt like I was a part of something historical. Even though like it was just amateur night, but it was amateur night in a theater that's really important to my own history, and having known all of these big name stars have sang and performed on the same stage that I stood on. It was just something so surreal and something so, I don't even really know how to describe it. It was just something that I felt like I belonged at that.
I was just gonna say,
on that stage. Do you know?
Did it feel like coming home?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And it's a weird feeling, especially given the fact that I had never, I had never been to Harlem before. I had never been in the Apollo Theater before, but there was just something about standing on that stage that just made me feel like I was at home.
Yeah.
It was an amazing experience, and it was also really great just like meeting everybody there and working with the band. Oh my god, that band was so fun. That band was so fun to work with. Oh. But yeah, like that was an amazing experience.
What did you sing?
I sang Who's Loving You by the Jackson 5.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I would try and change it, but as the competition went by, like they wouldn't let me change it. And after a while it kind of got old, but I would still have so much fun. I didn't even really care if I had won or anything like that. Like I still had so much fun just being up there and meeting everybody and working with the band.
And how was the audience? Because from what I've heard, the Apollo Theater audience can be very honest. At least that's what I've heard from history. It's like they're not going to just like you have to earn that audience's applause.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I will say I feel like they were like just a tad bit nicer when I was there, but yeah, no, like it's a tough crowd. It's a real tough crowd. And I'm not gonna lie, that intimidated me, but I wasn't going to let that stop me from having a good time. I mean, because I knew I deserved to be up there. Now all I have to do is just show them why I deserve to be up there. Yeah. But yeah, that audience can be pretty ruthless.
So moving forward, are there any artists that you'd like to collaborate with? Like dream, like it doesn't have to be like, just whoever you'd like to work with.
I was gonna say, like, most of them that I would love to work with are dead, so if we're talking about living artists, I know a lot of times I've said people like Janelle Monáe or like Lizzo, which is like very different from what I normally sing, but I think that the reason why I would want to collaborate with them is because I like the creativity in the way that I guess they show who they are.
Their authenticity.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate and admire their authenticity, and I think that I would love to just like be in the same room as them and just like pick their mind and see like, okay, if we were going to write a song together, like what would they say? What would they do? Like what would the vibe be? You know? And also I just really, really want to meet the both of them because they seem like really, really amazing people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so going back to the first response on this, so if you had like an all-star heaven concert where it didn't matter, living or dead, who are some of the people from the past that you'd want to resurrect, so to speak?
I would love to just like perform with like Nina Simone or like Eartha Kitt, people like that. Although like I know like they were not easy.
They were not easy people.
Artists. Like
I
they were not
I know
easy
someone who worked
people.
with Eartha.
Yeah.
I know someone who did a Broadway show with Eartha, and the story went they were on stage and she warned this girl not to block her and get in front of her. And the girl did not heed that advice, stepped in front of her, and Eartha kicked her into the orchestra pit. That was the story. So, but yeah. And she also had some interesting guests to the theater, and yeah, was always dressed to the nines. And yeah, I love all those stories.
I respect that though.
She warned the person.
Like, I'm not gonna say that she was right, but I will say that I understand. But at least she warned her.
She warned her. She said, if you do this, this will happen. And she kept her word. So that was at least the story that I heard. So
yeah, I've also seen Nina in interviews, and just like, she was not easy either. Like, she demanded respect from anybody and everybody, which I also respect. But,
and I understand with the amount of talent that she had. I mean, she was a classically trained pianist. I mean, she was basically a musical prodigy. And then you take the time period and you take what's going on. I understand that.
I love how limitless she was, because when I listen to her music, like, yes, I get that sometimes she would play, sometimes it would sound like jazz, sometimes it would sound like blues, sometimes it would sound like jazz mixed with classical. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it would just sound really folky. Like, there were no limits to who she was as an artist. And I think that was what I really, really appreciated about her. And also just the songs she would write and the power in her lyrics were just so moving to me that I couldn't help but gravitate towards her music.
So in addition to singing, you use your voice to write poetry. Are you interested in having your poems published in a collection? Would you ever set them to music like Kimiko did with her story?
Oh yeah, I've done it before. I wrote a poem back when the pandemic first hit. I was having a really, really rough time mentally. And I don't even remember writing the poem, but I revisited it a few months later, and I shared it with my now partner. I just wanted to show him and say, hey, I completely forgot that I wrote this, but I wanted you to hear it. And he just set it to music, and I thought it was the coolest thing that I had ever heard. And so I think that and the live stream that I did in New York recently were the only times that I had ever set my poems to music. But I absolutely love the idea of writing poems for music and things like that, and setting them up to different ambiances and different sounds and things like that. And I would also love to have my poems published. I just don't know the first place to start. But once I figure it out, I just might publish a poetry book.
Yeah. Now that'll be exciting. I find it really interesting because what I've found is most creative people are not just creative in one thing. The world likes to put us in a little box. You're a singer and you sing this. And you're an actor and you only act in TV or movies or Shakespeare. We're very compartmentalized. And I think a lot of creative people are creative and talented in multiple genres and in multiple disciplines. And I think it's just our way of expressing. And I think it's really cool, that you are a singer, but yet you're using your voice, your own voice, to express what you're feeling, not only what's given to you as a performer. And speaking of a performer, you're actually going to school for musical theater. So we've seen you up until now, like you've got this new recording that's jazz, it's a little bluesy. You've been doing a lot of concerts, singing the American Songbook, also some Lizzo. I like that cover a lot.
Thank you.
But you actually want to do musical theater. So I'm curious, what roles would you like to perform?
To keep it short and sweet, I think I have like 3 that I gravitate to, which is like Elphaba and Wicked, Angelica Schuyler, and what was the third one? I can't remember the third one right now, but as far as I know, like those are the 2 that I tend to gravitate to. Now, when I think about theater, I'm curious to know how I could originate my own role. I'm very, very interested in like new works that are maybe like off Broadway that are like just coming up, and I'm interested in kind of making my own character out of it. And I don't really know what that would be, but I think that it would be really, really interesting to do. I'm
sure a lot of composers would love to have you. I mean, they workshop anytime you're doing a new show, they workshop it. And I'm sure, that that's something that you could get involved in New York City, because they'll workshop. And then if you start off with the piece, you may end up again on Broadway with it. And I think you're right. There's something exciting about creating something from the start, versus stepping into a part which, depending on the show, might have its own baggage with it of what people are expecting, and kind of going, okay,
like
well, people are
expecting moments.
Exactly.
Like that.
Exactly. What kind of shows do you like, in general? Like, what musical theater shows do you like?
For me, it kind of depends on what mood I'm in. Like sometimes I do like the really campy ones. Let's see. Rocky Horror is one that I really, really love. I got cast as Janet recently for Rocky Horror.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, so that's gonna be really fun. But I like things that are like really, really campy, just really silly, not serious, not taking itself seriously at all. But I also really, really like theater that leaves you not in a brain fog, but just like leaves you chewing on something after you leave, like my partner took me to go see Next to Normal. Not recently, but a few months back. And I remember after I walked out of the theater, I just couldn't stop thinking about the different like all of the layers of that story, like the choices that the actors made, having to like digest all of the emotions that I felt and also that the actors conveyed on the stage, especially since it was their closing night. So
oh wow,
it was it was a lot. But I love theater that like leaves something for me to walk away with, leaves me something to think about and to process and to go further with, Yeah. I also just really, really like provocative theater.
Okay. So anything that you would be involved in, it's got to be new and thought-provoking and layered. You want some depth.
Or it could just be really, really campy and fun.
Or really campy and fun.
Yeah.
the two extremes.
Yeah.
Well, that gives you some balance, like sometimes it's fun being in a big dramatic show. And then other times you're like, oh, geez, like I don't, let's lighten up a little bit here. It can't be this dark every day.
One of the biggest things that I learned at the conservatory was that not everything has to be like grandiose or like meaningful or impactful. Like some things are just that it is what it is,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And sometimes it's more effective when it is what it is. Sometimes you're trying to make a meal out of an hors d'oeuvre. Just enjoy the hors d'oeuvre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So how do you want to use your voice moving forward? Whether that's as a singer, as a performer, as a poet.
I've thought about this question, and I don't think I really have a clear answer right now. I think the one thing that comes to mind when I think about using my voice is to maybe to lead or to awaken something in people.
Mm-hmm.
Because some of the poetry that I do write, like while sometimes it is about mental health, sometimes it's about love, sometimes it's about, I don't know, past memories or things like that. But I also love to write poetry that reflects life today, reflects like things like Black Lives Matter and police brutality and just being proud to be Black in
Mm-hmm.
America and just being Black in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to use my voice to inspire others to have that same pride, and have that same, I guess, that same energy, that same love for oneself as far as my Black audience goes. Like having that love of being Black and that love of being beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
And I think, as someone who's not in that community, I want to experience that too. And I'm not going to experience it in the same way, but there are so many things. I have a lot of friends from different cultures, and I love learning about what makes them unique and what they're bringing to the table and their heritage and their history, because it only enriches all of our experiences when we're open. And again, it goes back to storytelling. We all have stories, and all of the stories are important, and all of the stories need to be heard, because then we have a better and deeper understanding of other people. And if there's just one story, well, that's not accurate, Isn't it a richer story when everybody's voice is heard? So I would be interested in that, even though I don't feel that in the same way or experience in the same way. I would still be interested in that. And I'm sure other people would be as well.
Yeah, because I also find that when I do talk about things like Black Lives Matter and being Black in America in general, I find that a lot of times using my poetry brings my message across much clearer than if I were to try and sit down and like really go in depth, because my mind races and my mind goes and goes and goes. And for me, my poetry is a way of contextualizing it and putting it down in a way that I can understand it and that other people can take and internalize it in their own way.
It's almost meditative, like you could get to a stillness.
Yeah. Because it's really hard for my mind not to race, but it's just something about writing poetry where my thoughts just become so much more clear. And I can say what I want to say without hesitation, without apology, without feeling like I said something wrong or did something wrong. Like I'm proud of my poetry, and I'm proud to use it as a platform, and as a platform for what I believe in.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we do as artists. We're presenting, in the best case scenario, stories, feelings, emotions from an authentic, vulnerable place, so that in sharing that and in being vulnerable and sharing our talents in that way, we can encourage empathy. We can have somebody step into our shoes, whether it's in a poem or a song or a theatrical performance, and someone can actually for a moment forget who they are and try to imagine what you're going through. And I think that gives us a deeper understanding of other people and a deeper understanding of life. And it sure makes things more interesting as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
So where can we find out more about you, what you're doing, and where can we buy this amazing album?
Yeah, so you can find me and more information about the album at www.christinajones.com. You can also buy the album there as well as listen to it on Spotify or iTunes. And you can also find me and my poetry on my TikTok, which is _Christina Jones. And you can find out all the other shenanigans that I'm up to, whether it be Saturday Jazz or live streams or release parties on my Instagram, which is Christina Jones Official.
Okay, and for those listening and watching, we will include all of that in the show notes. So we'll have all of the links there for you to find out what Christina is up to. And thank you so much for coming and talking today. It was just a pleasure meeting you, learning more about you as an artist, your journey, and also about how you have been creating this album. And it's just a joy. And I'm really excited to see where you'll go.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me too. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. You've been listening to Christina Jones singing What Love Means to Me from her new album, You Were My Compass. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Create Outside the Box. Please follow us on Spotify or Buzzsprout and subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch our interviews. For more about creative operations and our projects, please visit www.creative-operations.org.